vam reći ovdje otvoreno. Bosna neće ostati u krnjoj Jugoslaviji.
U saglasnost predsjednika BiH Alije Izetbegovića, u Beograd dolaze Muhamed Filipović i Adil Zulfikarpašić.
Milošević je rekao, molim vas, Bosna i Hercegovina apsolutno neprikosnovena teritorijalno. Prvi predsjednik ove Jugoslavije koju ćemo napraviti bit će Izetbegović. U Bosni će služiti samo bosanska. Bosanci će služiti u vojsku. Uvijek će komandujući general biti musliman i tako dalje. A ja sam još dodao, mi ćemo ovaj naš sporazum registrovati i zatražiti, da tako kažem, njegovu zaštitu, odnosno garancije kod Evropske unije i kod Amerikanaca.
Alija Izetbegović na kraju odbija sporazum sa Miloševićem. Rešenje sada traži u dogovoru sa Hrvatskom. Međutim, ni sastanci sa Tuđmanom Izetbegoviću nisu doneli mirno rešenje.
Izetbegović called a referendum on independence. Muslims and Croats were the majority. So the president won his vote.
So we are expecting very fast recognition of the republic.
With American support, recognition of a separate Bosnian state was now inevitable. Lord Carrington tried to avert disaster by appointing Portuguese President José Coutinho to find common ground among the Serbs, Muslims, and Croats before an independent Bosnia was recognized.
I asked him to go to Sarajevo and to Lisbon and to have talks about with the three parties in Bosnia to see whether or not some agreement could be reached with a unitary state. I mean, a state, an independent Bosnian state, but in some sort of federal idea in which you've got the three communities to agree.
The Bosnian Serbs, Croats, and Muslims all signed the pact known as the Lisbon Agreement on March 18, 1992. This set up a central government of Bosnia-Herzegovina and 3 ethnic cantons on the model of Switzerland.
The last chance, I think, of trying to preserve Bosnia before the war broke out in earnest.
If the Lisbon Plan had been adopted, British author and BBC journalist Misha Glenny wrote later, the war in Bosnia probably would not have happened. But 2 days after signing it, following a meeting with American Ambassador Warren Zimmerman, Izetbegović changed his mind and disavowed his signature.
Izetbegović turned around and reneged, as he's reneged on other things.
Zimmerman later acknowledged to David Binder of the New York Times that Izetbegović had reluctantly signed the agreement to gain European recognition. More than a year after the bloodshed began in Bosnia, Zimmerman also admitted that the Lisbon Plan was not bad at all, but recalls telling Izetbegović, if you don't like it, why sign it?
Zimmerman told Izetbegović, look, why don't you wait and see what the U.S. can do for you, meaning we'll recognize you and then help you out. So don't go ahead with the Lisbon Agreement, don't accept the Coutinho plan, and just hold out for some kind of unitary Bosnian state. So this is a major turning point in our diplomatic efforts.
The American administration made it quite clear that they thought that the proposals, the Coutinho and my proposals, were unacceptable.
With no agreement amongst the Muslims, Serbs, and Croats, and with all sides mobilized for war, the European community voted, as the U.S. insisted, to recognize Bosnia on April 6th, along with Slovenia and Croatia. This act, Roger Cohen of the New York Times later wrote, was as close to criminal negligence as a diplomatic act can be. Indeed, international recognition and the outbreak of the Bosnian War were simultaneous. The world put light to the future.
Jose Kutiljero je praktično optužio Aliju Izetbegovića za propast mirovnog plana iz marta 1992. godine. Karta Bosne i Hercegovine nakon Dejtonskog sporazuma ne razlikuje se bitno u odnosu na kartu koja je predložena u mirovnom sporazumu iz marta 1992. godine, što znači da se uzalud ginulo na sve tri strane.
Ako pogledate drugi način, ako pogledate Dejtonski sporazum, ako pogledate karte iz Dejtonskog sporazuma, shvatit ćete iz mog pisma upućenog ekonomistu da nakon 3 godine pune tragedija nije se otišlo mnogo dalje od onoga što smo mi predviđali. Bosna je to što jeste, nije ništa drugo.
Očigledno, tadašnje političko rukovodstvo u Sarajevu nije prihvatalo rješenja koja vode miru. Željelo je unitarnu Bosnu po svaku cijenu. Rat je mogao da počne.
What the international community on the whole, the Europeans and the Americans and the United Nations have done, on the whole, made it sure there was going to be a conflict.
The intelligence community was unanimous in saying that if we go ahead and recognize Bosnia, it will blow up.
Because there was no agreed branches and because everybody was armed, if you ruptured the old Yugoslavia by unilaterally declaring independence, in fact, seceding was a war of secession. Once you decided to secede, you had no hope that it could be done peacefully.
Argued that recognition would take away the diplomatic leverage that he had to try to bring the conflict in Croatia to an end and could possibly result in Bosnia blowing up.
In his book, The Politics of Diplomacy, then Secretary of State James Baker wrote that Ambassador Zimmerman strongly advised him to recognize Bosnia. Recognition of Bosnia, however, violated the most basic diplomatic norms. For a government to be recognized, it must be in full control of its territory, it must have clearly established borders, it must also have a stable population. Not a single one of these essential conditions existed in Bosnia in February of 1992, when Zimmerman made his recommendation. U.S. intelligence analysts predicted that recognition would lead to war. Even the Germans thought that recognition of Bosnia would be a serious mistake.
Nein, es hat eine Meinungsverschiedenheit gegeben.
We did have some different opinions in early 1992, as the Americans supported the recognition of Bosnia, whereas we, the Europeans, believed that we should first establish a framework for the whole region.
So basically the policymakers ignored the analysts, and by late January, early February, U.S. policy had come around to the view that we would recognize Bosnia, and we wanted the Europeans to recognize Bosnia along with us. So from mid-February on, we were pushing the Europeans hard to recognize Bosnia, and we were thinking about how we would do that and have the U.S. recognize Croatia and Slovenia at the same time.
When you get involved in something like this with 1,000 years of history underlying it all, you need to understand that once the dam breaks, the viciousness can be pretty awful on all sides.
In the end, here also, peace would be sacrificed for domestic politics. There was an American election coming up.
When we finally went ahead and recognized, one of the reasons we did so was because it had become a major domestic political issue for us here. We have particularly a large Croatian-American community. And Mr. Bush lost most of them in the election that he lost, because they were unhappy with our having delayed as long as we did in recognizing Croatia.
While German actions encouraged the armed secession of Slovenia and Croatia, it was U.S. diplomacy, particularly through Ambassador Warren Zimmerman, which helped light the spark for a war in Bosnia-Herzegovina by supporting Muslim leader Alija Izetbegović in his bid for a separate state.
And then we were the ones that went to the Europeans and insisted that they recognized Bosnia, and then we would recognize all three of the new states. And that was the deal that was made. And of course, it was precisely that led to the current war.
This was a war that European leaders believe could have been avoided.
The Bosnian Serbs, until comparatively recently, had been in the majority in Bosnia. And then the Muslims, who had a very much higher birth rate than the Serbs, became the predominant, the majority population. And this, of course, was something very hard for the Serbs to swallow. And they made it abundantly plain very early on that they were not prepared to accept a situation in which there was an independent Bosnia under the constitution which then prevailed. And indeed, under the constitution which then prevailed, it was illegal for Izetbegović to declare independence, because any constitutional change of that magnitude had to be agreed by all three parties.
Privately, European leaders worried about Izetbegović's close ties to Iran and the possibility of a Muslim fundamentalist state in the heart of a newly unified Europe.
Izetbegović himself had ties to the Iranians going back long before they came to power in Bosnia, really beginning not too long after the Iranian Revolution came to power in 1979.
Begović rejected a multi-ethnic Bosnia in his book, The Islamic Declaration, written in 1970, where he states, "There can be neither peace nor coexistence between the Islamic religion and non-Islamic social political systems." Izetbegović's defenders claimed that he had modified his views, but in fact, the Islamic Declaration was officially reprinted in time for the 1990 election campaign without any changes. It was in 1990 when he gave an interview to a magazine which celebrated Muslim World War II collaboration with Nazi Germany. The cover of the magazine pictured Serbian leaders with severed heads.
There are no Croats or Serbs visible in that Izetbegović government with any real authority. The Bosnian army, as it calls itself now, is mainly Muslim, Muslim manned, Muslim officered.
The victims and the Serbs as the aggressors. It should be remembered, however, the first blood shed in the struggle was Serb blood. 2 Muslim gunmen and 1 Croat stalked a Serb Orthodox wedding party in the heart of old Sarajevo. The father of the groom was killed. The Orthodox priest was wounded.
Došli smo na parkiralište ispred vijećnice, gdje su se zaustavili kolona svatovska. Oni su izašli iz auta i od nas su počeli sa pjesmama. Neke su zastave njihove srpske izvadili iz auta, počeli da mašu njime. Mi smo tog momenta stali ispred njih, pitali gdje će da idu. I da ovo nije Srbija, da je ovo Sarajevo, da je ovo Čaršija. Mi smo onda skočili, ja i drug čovjek, skočili smo na ove momke koji su držali zastave u rukama. Istrgli smo im zastavi iz ruku, tada je nastao jedan haos.
Aleksa Jovančić dobro se sjeća prvog pucnja i gužve kada je grupa sarajevskih kriminalaca pokušala da od barektara otme srpsku zastavu. Jasno je vidio čovjeka koji puca u nenaoružanog Nikolu Gardovića. Kasnije će saznati da je to bio Ramiz Delalić-Ćelo.
Vidio sam da je čovjek objema rukama ovako držao pištolj uperen prema Nikoli i jednog momenta sam čuo samo 2 pucnja. Nikola je kao Nikola pao.
The killing of Nikola Gardović on March 1st was a prelude to the war in Sarajevo. Despite promises from the government, the killers, who were well known, were not arrested. The following day, roadblocks were set up by both Muslims and Serbs. Unable to protect their civilian population, Serbs began to insist that predominantly Serbian areas of the city be controlled by their own police, or that Sarajevo become a UN protectorate. Muslims insisted on the Izetbegović government's right to control not only Sarajevo, but all of Bosnia. To get the West to intervene, they needed to persuade Western public opinion that the Serbs were aggressors. Took place outside the capital before fighting in Sarajevo began. The first massacre of the war, which was carried out on March 26th in Sjekovac near Bosanski Brod in northern Bosnia, was ignored by Western news organizations. Interestingly, the slaughter of 5 Serbian families and the burning of the village by Croatian forces was reported by the pro-government Sarajevo newspaper Oslobođenje. A week later, on April 2nd, Croatian forces captured the town of Kupres in central Bosnia. After the town was recaptured, Serbian television offered footage of Serbian soldiers and civilians who had been mutilated to Eurovision in Geneva for worldwide transmission. But they were turned down by officials in Geneva who said they already had the story from the Croatians.
Očekivao sam da će doći do sukoba. 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 Očekivao sam da će do Očekivao sam da će doći do sukoba